Hello and welcome to Season 8 of How to Start Up, a podcast for anyone starting a company. Hosted by me, Juliet Fallowfield, founder of PR, communications and podcast consultancy Fallowfield & Mason. It's more important than ever for businesses to incorporate sustainable and ethical practices into their products and services. Not only is this morally the right thing to do, but it also makes commercial sense as customers become more discerning with who they spend their money with. Sustainable and ethical behaviour isn't limited to just environmental practices. It translates into all areas of business, including providing opportunities for people who may find themselves excluded from the workforce. This is why I was really pleased to be able to speak to Alex Head. She founded the leading sustainable catering company Social Pantry over 10 years ago, and is one of the first 15 UK companies employing ex-offenders to be awarded the prestigious United Flag Award. Social Pantry is a dedicated champion for equity and opportunity within the workforce. In this episode, Alex shares her advice on how founders can overcome the stigma of starting up a business but doing it differently, and why now is the right time to declare what your intentions are when it comes to your ESG goals. Hi Alex, it's great to have you on How to Start Up today. It would be wonderful if you could kick off with a brief introduction as to who you are and a bit about the business that you started.
I'm Alex Head and I own Social Pantry, and we are an events and contract catering company. And I also have a couple of sites in London, and I employ a brilliant team over the capital, and our USP is our sustainability and social ex-offender employment.
And when did you start Social Pantry?
So I started back in 2011 now, which feels like a very long time ago. So definitely over a decade.
And why?
I always was working in the hospitality industry, kind of grew up, loved cooking, loved entertaining, loved throwing a party. I studied hospitality and business. I chefed in lots of kind of terrifying, scary restaurants when I was much younger. Did lots of kind of paid work in restaurants and unpaid work in restaurants kind of back in the day when I was kind of 15, 16. I just kind of really enjoyed it and really loved it. I then always had a bit of a side hustle, I suppose. So I was always kind of cooking dinner parties or baking cakes or ready meals for people's freezers. And I was running pubs and restaurants for a couple of entrepreneurs who were brilliant and doing really well. So I was kind of doing a couple of sites openings for them. And actually, it was when one of the sites that we opened didn't work. After 6 months, it closed. It was a pizza opening, pizza by the slice. Was maybe, if you kind of look at New York and, maybe it was a bit before its time. I mean, it actually just didn't work out. They just chose the wrong premises. So when that closed, it was a great little company called Melito. When Melito closed, I had kind of built up a bit of a business on the side, I suppose. And it was at that point, I was about 24 or 25. And I thought, shall I do this full time? Shall I just give it a shot? So I thought, okay, I'm just going to say yes to every single bit of catering that comes my way. And for the first kind of 6 months of Social Pantry, I still waitressed. I went back to waitressing. So kind of just waitress for a little bit of steady income. And for the weeks when I wasn't as busy. But I then just kind of rented kitchens through the night and said yes to every single catering job or request that came in. And here I am now.
And did you call it Social Pantry to start with? Because obviously that social responsibility element of your business model is so key. What gave you the idea for it in the first place?
We named it well over a decade ago, but also wanted it to do some social good. I started mentoring a gentleman called Ruben, who's brilliant, fantastic. He's great. He still works at Social Pantry now. He didn't actually start working at Social Pantry until a few years ago, but I was mentoring him. He was my first ever prison visit. And the charity I went in with actually said, would you employ one of the other prison leavers? So at that time, I think I only employed kind of 5 or 6 staff. So I kind of got everybody in a room and I said, hey, listen, I've been asked to take on board an ex-offender. Would you guys be open to it? Well, then we met Suhail and everybody was like, yeah, cool, we're up for this as a team. So quite a small team. We thought, yeah, brilliant. Why don't we do that? And so Suhail joined, and then he started on 3 days a week. He wasn't that committed. So I kind of had to say to him, I took him aside and I said, hey, listen, I've worked really hard to kind of get here. So you either do 5 days a week or nothing at all, but either commit and be on board and make the most of the opportunity or don't. And actually that bit of tough love worked. And he stayed with us for kind of, I think, 4 or 5 years in the end and kind of grew within the company, which was really great. So he was a real success story, but he was my first ever ex-offender.
Presumably 10 years ago, there was a lot of stigma attached to employing ex-offenders. Why, were you volunteering in the first place? Where did that impetus come from? And why is it so important that you've embedded that into your business model now?
I was always just kind of quite interested in prisons. I can't remember how I got in touch with the charity. It was Key for Life, who are brilliant and fantastic, and I suppose got us into ex-offender employment, gave me the confidence to do it initially, which was great. But I think it was a friend's mum actually who said that had mentioned the charity, and I realised that actually you could mentor, and I just thought, why not? Initially, I was just a buddy for Ruben, but giving back is really important. That for me has always just been a bit of a passion and a bit of a side hobby. And over the years, I've done all sorts, from kind of, there's a brilliant church in Chelsea that I used to feed the homeless in. That was great. And I suppose with the ex-offender element of it, I could easily offer opportunity with Social Pantry. So why not when given the chance?
I presume there are pros and cons to this in terms of internal buy-in from your teams. Have you had any pushback from clients? What challenges have you faced in doing this?
Yeah, it's so funny that you say about the stigma early on. Like at the beginning, I would not have told anybody. We kept it totally under wraps because Social Pantry was still this kind of emerging brand. We were still having to really prove ourselves. We were working with kind of lots of fashion clients, and really ultimately Social Pantry is delivering incredible events, incredible workplace catering, and brilliant sites. So nothing can get in the way of that.
You don't compromise on anything.
Yeah, exactly. We're open to the elements, we're not bulletproof. When people join the team, they have to be brilliant. And that goes to the ex-offenders as well. At any point, if it's less positive than it is good, then we ultimately kind of can't do that. So we have to make sure that nothing compromises the product. So at the beginning, we definitely didn't tell anybody. I just wasn't confident enough, and the brand wasn't in kind of a big enough place, I suppose. And then slowly but surely, I started kind of telling clients. And actually, I suppose that was in line with people having more kind of appetite for it and being slightly more open to it. But in terms of the team here, like I think that's one of the main reasons people join Social Pantry is for the ex-offender element and the social values. They really do love it. And I think there was a survey, actually, I can't remember if it was the caterer a couple of years ago that did it, and it said like 98% of people would be happy to work alongside somebody having a second chance. So there's definitely values to it, that it does cost a lot of time, energy, emotion. But now luckily, I suppose we do get clients on the back of it as well, which is great. But it's taken us, a long time to kind of be that confident with it. But it's nice now that we're recognised and being rewarded for leading the way, I suppose, and being brave all those years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, huge congratulations. And I think staffing, anyone I've spoken to for the podcast has said finding the best people is the hardest part of the job. And the people management element is the most time consuming and the most emotional. And it's just everything. And it can eat you up when you get it wrong. And you're just like, oh, it's at the forefront of your every day if it's wrong. But
totally,
that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be an ex-offender to not be performing. Anyone in the business, it might just not be the right job for them. So have you done a lot of sort of HR work or training in recruitment, or how have you really looked after your people?
Ultimately, Social Pantry is so reliant on the team, and they are kind of what makes Social Pantry so brilliant. And having started it from kind of the bottom up and from scratch, I've definitely got it so wrong at points, and obviously I've got some things right to still be in business and still be still operating. So I think for me, it's about kind of learning quite quickly. It's learning from your mistakes. There are points where I've got it wrong, or gone down the wrong path with the structure, or potentially put the wrong people in the wrong positions. And do you know what? We all get it wrong, and that's totally okay. It's about kind of recognizing it and making sure that everybody is enjoying their job, feels valued, isn't at any point kind of out of their depth, but also is always learning and growing. I think that's something that we really try to focus on at Social Pantry, is during their time at Social Pantry is trying to kind of upskill them and give them skills they can take on to other employers. But actually, just giving them learning experiences, making sure that they leave Social Pantry having learned lots and enjoyed it. That's the kind of aim of the game. The hospitality industry is really hard work. And so, at the end of the day, if we can make it a really brilliant environment for employees, then we definitely will try. But it has to be a balanced approach. Ultimately, we haven't got the biggest budgets to work with. It's a really competitive industry. The margins aren't huge. So we have to do it in a way that works for the business. But we definitely are trying to kind of always be quite innovative in what we can do and what we can provide our teams. And it's as simple as some of our team kind of do their doubly set training. They might do first aid courses. We did our first diversity inclusion actually course earlier this year. We kind of put 30 of the team through that, which was really exciting. And they were really receptive to that. But when you do a year at Social Pantry in the kitchen, say you go off and do a stage, so you go and work, we pay for you to go and work at another kitchen. So off they go and work at a zero waste kitchen. So Sarah went to Helsinki a couple of years ago, which was brilliant. They go off to Silo in East London, and we're just looking at a stage for our stylists to go off and work with a production company. So it's all about getting visibility, learning, and I suppose just walking away from Social Pantry when you do leave, whether you've done 1 year or 5 years, thinking, gosh, that was actually really great. That A, they cared about me, and B, I learned loads. That's the aim of the game.
That's so important. But I think people around you make and break your job. You can have the best job description in the world, but if the people around you aren't your people or you don't fit that culture, you can be miserable. And I love what you said about when people leave. And I've said to my team, you will leave me at some point. We have to admit this. I don't want this to happen, but we have to be transparent about this, that at some point you're going to want to move on. And if I can't find you a job within the business, I will help you get a job elsewhere. And I was like, but you're encouraging people to leave. I'm like, I'm not. I'm actually probably encouraging them to stay because they can be completely transparent with me about it. And I think making sure the time they spend in our company is the best time that they can. And for catering and hospitality, I've been on that side as well. I grew up waitressing and I've worked behind bars and I worked for hotels. So I know how hard it can be. I don't envy you, but I also know what an incredible reputation your business has. And the fact you're performing at that high level of luxury brands and you don't drop anything, that's a lot of pressure. How do you manage that responsibility?
Definitely a lot of pressure. The clients kind of get more and more demanding. And, quite rightly, when they're paying a lot of money, of course, that's kind of our job. And we're in the service industry. That's the reality of it. If you don't want to be working the holidays and when people are partying, working, then it's just not the right industry. So we're quite transparent about that. Yeah, so it's just having a brilliant, brilliant team of people. Ultimately, they are so skilled. They are so intelligent. They are so switched on. They've got the best experience. And really for us, it's about onboarding people with the best skills. I think what's challenging at the moment, sometimes we can't compete with the pay checks that some of the big guys are offering. So again, it comes down to culture and kind of what they're going to kind of learn and where they enjoy working. But for us, it's about giving a lot of opportunity. Like often at Social Pantry, they might be relatively junior, but they might be managing really quite exciting clients that they maybe wouldn't get in a bigger team. So there's a lot of responsibility that comes with it, and a lot of exposure. In a slightly smaller business, there's a lot of exposure to both the bigger events and everything that's going on. So they're definitely going to learn lots at Social Pantry. It's always quite satisfying when someone comes back round. Like we call them a boomerang, and we're always thrilled when we get one coming back, because that's always like, okay, we've kind of done something right there.
It's the biggest compliment because they're like, I tried somewhere else. Actually, I prefer you.
Yeah, actually, I'll come back. That wasn't so great. So, the grass is always greener for all, and that's the reality. So we just need to be creative about how we can create an environment that's really brilliant.
Especially in hospitality, for sure.
But also a bit of a work-life balance as well. I think that's really important.
And given you're over a decade old with Social Pantry, do you think now you're recruiting people because of your values with the company and you're recruiting clients and employees? Is that become a little bit more obvious in the recruitment when they're interviewing you as much as you're interviewing them? Are they joining because of those ESG values that you've got bedded into the company?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. I think that would be cited in most interviews. I would say, I think that's definitely, and we always try and do get a prison visit within the kind of first 6 months of them starting Social Pantry, just so they can kind of see exactly how it works. And we work with Redemption Roasters who roast coffee behind bars. So going in to see that set up, or coming into and meet the Employers Day in the prisons that we work with. And we're actually in chats with 2 prisons about opening a staff mess. One's been in motion for a couple of years, so should happen pretty quickly. It started and then stopped, but yeah, that's at Feltham, and then Wandsworth Prison as well. So we should within the next kind of year have 2 sites behind bars where we feed the staff mess as well. So the employees at Social Pantry will have exposure to that. But at the moment, we just try and kind of get them into prison just so they can understand it and see that journey that the guys have come on when coming out.
It clearly really is at the forefront of your business and you're super passionate about it. And you've been committed to this for a long time. What is it in your gut that keeps you committed to this and keeps you determined to make this succeed?
I think the guys, like, honestly, they are brilliant, and they're pretty charismatic. They're quite fun. And for us, it's about, they've done their time, and it's about, if the judicial system and probation and legal system says they're to be released into society, why wouldn't we offer them a job? Like, why wouldn't we? I've been given chances when I had no skills and no experience. So some of them do come having got experience, and that's brilliant, and having worked in the industry before or behind bars. And some of them come just with the right attitude. So we're all about that. We're kind of like, cool, join the team, be ready to learn. And if we can, I suppose, help them kind of not reoffend, and give one of a number of elements that they need to help them, which is, housing, family setup can affect it, whether they have a job or not. All those factors actually kind of feed into the likelihood of them reoffending. So if we can kind of eliminate one and support in the other areas as well, then why not?
And do you think in the food and beverage industry and hospitality, it's harder to bed in environmental responsibility and social responsibility than other sectors, or is it equally challenging across any startup?
I definitely think it's challenging. Cross sector, I don't fully know, but I know the hospitality industry, I suppose, doesn't have the biggest margins. And so that ultimately we have a 5-year roadmap. We're just sitting between year 2 and 3 at the moment. And we're kind of on track.
And you've published this on your website as well. I wanted to ask, you declared it.
Yeah, totally. We were like, hey, this is what our goals are. And if we don't reach them for any reason, here are the reasons. But we are on track at the moment and doing everything we can to kind of hit it. And we're totally transparent about it because we're doing what we can within our budgets, within our capacity, within our operational structure. And I suppose when Sarah went off to Helsinki and learned lots, that's in a restaurant. So what works in a restaurant is brilliant, fantastic. Can you kind of put that across catering? And just to give you some idea of volume, the workplace side will do kind of 30 to 40 drops a week. And on the event side, they'll do the same. So 35 to 45 events a week.
My goodness.
Yeah, the scale of it is really challenging.
That's huge.
Yeah, we're like about to go into June as well, so it's quite full on. So really, some things that work well in a standalone site and can be rolled out very easily there actually doesn't work, and it takes a different system or a different perspective. But when we were kind of looking at it, 3 or 4 years ago, I actually brought on board a sustainability consultant, and she is brilliant. She's the expert. She's the one keeping me up to date, keeping me learning. We're big about education for the team, but I'd advise anybody really just to get an expert in that area. Like you might have an expert a consultant for HR or marketing, definitely have one for sustainability. She's the expert. The laws are always changing and you've got to try and kind of stay at the forefront of it. So with accreditations and to prevent greenwashing, we're going for B Corp and relatively far down the line, but you need to kind of be able to really have the stats and facts and understand kind of what you're doing rather than just kind of putting the terminology in a response to a client. So for us, it's about being quite transparent and hopefully people can learn from that, but we're not getting it all right. And there's always more that we want to do, but we're kind of on our journey. We know that we're doing what we can for the size of our business, at our profit levels and with our capabilities, I suppose.
Well, that's why it's so interesting to talk to you, because I've learned, having gone through the B Corp thing as well, it's not just about tracking your carbon footprint, which everyone's like, oh, but you get planes, you can't be B Corp. And I was like, well, it's also about community, clients, governance, people. And you and your business tick so many of those boxes in terms of you're looking after your people first, your employees, your clients, and then also your sourcing of ingredients, because that for you is obviously going to be a huge headache and ever-changing, seasonal changes, Brexit, you name it, you've probably had it thrown at you in terms of sourcing. Is there any advice that you give people on pipeline when they're starting a business?
Yeah, I think for us, the product is what I suppose kind of generates and repeat business. So for us, that product, so it's that service and it's that food and it's that event delivery. So if people are enjoying the product and the menus and they're well balanced and well put together from brilliant suppliers, then you're doing something right. And it's just kind of repeating that. And I suppose as you're growing, it's doing that, but on a little bit more scale each time. So it's about kind of working with the best suppliers. Points we've had to kind of work with, say, 2 butchers. One, because one's slightly family run and actually can't kind of handle the scale that we need. So we then kind of look at, it's about making sure your supply chains are sensible, that they work for your business, that everything works for them in terms of their payment terms, through to their location, through to where there are their reactiveness. Our suppliers are really reactive actually. So we can be really last minute with our orders. If an event comes in tomorrow, we could phone the butcher and they could deliver something in this afternoon. So there's a number of things to look at when you're kind of deciding what suppliers to work with. But ultimately, it has to be a real partnership. But every bit of the product has to be refined so that it's brilliant and people do come back for more. And any consumer kind of knows that, whether it's hair care or something you buy in the supermarket, why do you go back to that product or service? Or why would you go back and spend money on something again? And it's because you really enjoyed it, or it tasted good, or it was a good experience. So ultimately for us, that's what's so important.
Do you mind me asking, have you now gone after investment in your decade of Social Pantry?
Yes. So back in 2019, I secured some investment, which was great.
And do you think the investors looked at what you were doing in terms of ESG and that was favourable to them, or were they put off by all the relationships that you're building with your employee pipeline?
No, definitely favourable. Yeah, people often are kind of asked, is it tricky for female founders to get investment? But the time is right. If you're a female-led business and you're doing something sustainably, absolutely now's the time. A lot of people have got a lot of money to spend if you're talking to the right networks, I suppose. And a lot of people have quotas that they have to meet in terms of their sustainability investments and their ESG investments. So it would be brave, I'd say, to not have that as part of it. But yeah, I assume it kind of made us stand out. Whether it was because I was a female founder as well, I don't know.
And did they question you on the prison and crime prevention organisations, the partnerships that you have?
Yes, I think people are always quite interested. Yeah, at any point, is that kind of a risk? But ultimately, you kind of mitigate that risk. But employing anybody's a risk,
Yes.
you could argue that somebody that's kind of spent some time in prison is at least like totally aware of what that route is and that journey that they've come through. But ultimately, you've got a lot of support from probation, from some charities, from the prisons, from the mentors. So it's a whole community that you're within. It's not just a business and an ex-offender. And just meeting these guys totally dissipates any fear around it, actually. And it's really, some of the guys, I suppose, had some really tough starts in life. And actually them kind of coming out and just being given an opportunity is the first opportunity that they've ever had or ever felt part of. So ultimately, they're really not going to present that much of a risk, but it's a case-by-case scenario.
Absolutely. And one thing we do is the guest from the previous episode had a question for you. And it was, if you could have changed your sustainability path, what would you have done differently to help others make sure they don't make the same mistakes again?
I think at the beginning, I probably would have written a business plan and maybe got some investment back in the day.
Really? But then you wouldn't be where you are today. Why that? Because I was the same. I was like, I assumed if I had to start a business, I needed a business plan. And I was made redundant. It's like, oh no, I'm just starting now. And just opened a laptop. And a lot of people said I wouldn't have wasted any time on a business plan. I regret spending so much time doing the business plan.
Oh, really? Okay, that makes me feel better. Okay.
So I don't know if it's a grass is always greener thing again.
Yeah, true.
But looking back, what do you think the business plan would have given you at the beginning? Sort of security or peace of mind?
Yes, maybe just a little bit more structure, I suppose. But really, for me, it was about saying yes to everything and anything. And that gave me such a vast experience, I suppose, in the world of hospitality. We've done everything across the board, from kind of feeding football teams to in-house sites at members clubs to rest. We've kind of done all of it. So I suppose it was just some kind of hard and painful lessons. But
you feel your way with it.
Yeah, totally. And I suppose for me, doing it while I was young and had the energy, that was definitely wise. But in terms of sustainability, I think we've developed it as we've gone along. It's definitely something that requires budget and time. And so I would say that weaving that in, either if I was to start a business now, I would 100% have it as a really big part of my business plan and my investment pitch. And I would really make any new business concept, for me, I would have sustainability at the heart of it, because I think that's the way it's going on a business front, but also from a personal note. Why wouldn't we be trying to do good whilst running a business? I think there's a social responsibility for business owners to where they can try and make a difference. So if I started now, I would 100% weave it in and almost make it the focus. Yeah. But each of their own, and I'm assuming that every industry is so different. But in the hospitality industry, there are benefits as well. Like our zero waste mentality in the kitchen is brilliant. You know, that does kind of save money. Reducing red meats and from our menus is something that we're kind of focusing on at the moment. And that actually means that where it's kind of more vegan and veggie-led menus, I suppose it's a little bit more cost effective to do it that way. And then when you're buying meat, you're just buying the best quality. So for us, it's all about kind of using the best suppliers and the best quality that we can afford and that we can get. So it's working with the best suppliers, really, and making sure that it is just everything that we do is sustainable where possible.
Is there a question that you'd like to ask for the next guest?
Yes. Oh my goodness. I think for me, it's about, I mean, we do take time now to kind of celebrate the big wins, because we're like, hey, we've got to really embrace this because big wins are great. So yeah, we've really learned to celebrate them. But I suppose for me as a founder, I'm often kind of looking at what I didn't get right and what actually could I improve. And I suppose the question I always love asking other founders is, when they're looking back, what do they remember as being like a mistake that they've really learned from?
And then flipping it on its head, what would you say is your biggest success so far?
Oh gosh, biggest success. I think Social Pantry as a brand is really strong, and I really can't take much credit for it. I had a brilliant Charlotte, actually, who's just gone off on maternity leave, but she's really brilliant. And actually it was kind of onboarding that marketing support quite early on. Like we weren't actually in a position where we could kind of afford anybody in the marketing team. And this was pre-Instagram. You know, I started Social Pantry before Instagram and, social media. Can you even imagine? So
sounds great. Take me back.
So I think it was her kind of persuading me like, hey, I really could, work some magic with your brand. Like, I think actually we'd be quite a good partnership in that. So it was probably saying yes to her all those days, years ago. But I remember when she first started, because I wasn't so sure that we really needed marketing support, she had to serve one of our contracts for 2 days a week. So she would be a server for 2 days a week and then marketing support for 3 days a week. But obviously now
well, she got to know the business
from the bottom up. And actually now, still to this day, whenever you join Social Pantry, no matter regardless of seniority or position, you all do a day in the kitchen.
Oh, yeah.
They're initially a little bit nervous, but actually then love it and come out kind of quite inspired.
All hands on deck, which now makes me think I'm going to get everyone in the team to edit a podcast. A lot of them are like, no, I don't think that's for me. I'm like, okay, I'll keep doing it.
One of our planners, Eliza, she was brilliant, a senior planner. She literally would reel out how she'd made like 1,000 mini shortbreads. Like she literally, from her one kitchen day 5 years ago, she would still repeat it to any kind of new starter. She's like, they make
Love
them
it.
fresh, 1,000 of it, and everything. So it's really good, and everyone kind of has their own little story. But it's just also to break down in an industry where there's kind of front of house and back of house and office team. It's just to break down those walls. And no point are our kitchens kind of shouty. They're really nurturing, brilliant places. They're female heavy and obviously got extra vendors in. Gone are the days of the Ramsey shouty kitchens. That's like decades old now. And having been in those kitchens, like absolutely no way was I ever going to have environments like that. But it's really lovely to kind of, for the finance team to have done a day in the kitchen, and just that cohesion as well. It's quite satisfying.
And is there any last golden nugget piece of advice you'd like to offer a new founder when bedding in sustainability from the start?
I think just keep learning, get the right advice and keep learning, be dynamic and be flexible with your goals, have kind of moving targets, and don't expect to conquer everything immediately. Like you can't, but as long as you're being honest about what you're doing and honest with what your challenges are, I think that's really important. And clients and team are really understanding, and suppliers are totally understanding if you can't do everything straight away or you're just on your journey of learning. But educating yourself and your team, I'd say, is really important, and getting the right advice. I have some brilliant people around me that give me the right advice.
And then also I think it's choosing what not to listen to as well. I've learned going, hang on, gut feeling is quite important.
Yeah, go with your gut. Oh my goodness, go with your gut. Yeah. On our sustainability, so Nash, our consultant, a year ago, she came to us and kind of said, listen, we should take the plastic polluters, so like the Nestle's and the Coca-Cola, so the San Pellegrinos and the Coca-Colas out of the cafes. And I just was like, oh gosh, well, we were kind of coming out of COVID, and it just felt like too much of a financial implication actually at that point. And although I totally kind of understood the consequences, and then actually 6 months later, and I was like, yeah, cool, I'm totally comfortable with this. So it was just kind of saying to her at the moment that the implications of that we can't kind of shoulder. So, and actually now 6 months later, it felt totally right. And that was in, I think, January that we did it, but it felt right. So we did a little campaign about ditching the brands doing us dirty. And we've got some brilliant Corsten Press and Dash Waters in our cafes that we had anyway. And it's just heroing those British-led suppliers that are honest brands doing great things. So, but yeah, it was totally okay to say, actually, do you know what, we can't do that right now. Let's just give it 6 months. And then we really kind of created something of it when we did it, because it was such a big decision for us. So it was really highlighting the fact that, like, hey, we are relatively small still, but we are really making a commitment.
Well, a force for good, and a force doesn't need to be a big one. It can just be chipping away at it little by little, and it adds up. But when you've come to set your goals, have you got any advice for people? So I'm 3 years in, so very, very young in terms of my business. What advice would you give someone like me setting out to set goals?
I would say kind of every quarter or every 2 goals a year or 1 every quarter, and to try and kind of work towards that. One big thing is, sure, there's kind of an online sustainability training. I know that our team, as soon as they join, they do an onboarding of sustainability. And it's a really simple question. We also did the other day, some people went in person to the recycling plant, just kind of understanding. So some will go off and visit the B Corp Champagne, British champagne supplier, and some are at the recycling plant. So there's different levels of glamour to it all, but it's all just as important. But I suppose it's educating the team and getting them to really understand, and then just road mapping out a few goals. And it can be so simple. Like there's kind of some really brilliant advice out there on kind of what to do. But I suppose looking at what other companies that are doing that are similar size and what their goals are, and then working out what your budget is, and then working out, okay, I can spend that on 3 different things, and actually what is the most important to us as a company. And it might be your recycling, it might be your emissions. It could totally kind of differ. Like we work with lots of different venues over London, and their kind of goals totally differ.
Thank you, Alex, so much for all of your advice, and congratulations on everything you've achieved across all of your different stakeholders. It's incredibly impressive.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really kind.
If you'd like to contact Alex, you can find all of her details in the show notes, along with a recap of the advice that she has so kindly shared. If you have any questions on the topics in this season, or from previous guests, or on PR communications on podcasting, I'd love to hear from you on juliet@fallowfieldmason.com. I hope you enjoy this season. Sustainable and ethical behaviour isn't limited to just environmental practices. It translates into all areas of business, including providing opportunities for people who may find themselves excluded from the workforce. This is why I was really pleased to be able to speak to Alex Head. She founded the leading sustainable catering company, Social Pantry, over 10 years ago, and is one of the first 15 UK companies employing ex-offenders to be awarded the prestigious United Flag Award. Social Pantry is a dedicated champion for equity and opportunity within the workforce. In this episode, Alex shares her advice on how founders can overcome the stigma of starting up a business but doing it differently, and why now is the right time to declare what your intentions are when it comes to your ESG goals. If you'd like to contact Alex, you can find all of her details in the show notes, along with a recap of the advice that she has so kindly shared.